The roar of the crowd was a physical force, a wave of pure, unadulterated joy that washed over me, vibrating through the stadium seats and up into my bones. Taylor Swift was a glittering speck on the distant stage, but her voice, clear and powerful, wrapped around the tens of thousands of us packed into Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. The stadium lights pulsed in a rainbow kaleidoscope, a synchronized heartbeat for the masses. I screamed along with everyone else, my voice lost in the chorus of thousands, a single drop in an ocean of adoration. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was at the pinnacle of pop culture emotion, being celebrated for a career built on meticulous control and strategic communication, when a single text message would accuse me of being the one thing I wasn't: too emotional. Next to me, Patricia Henderson, a woman whose tailored power suits and sharp bob were more at home in a boardroom than a stadium, was swaying with a surprisingly youthful abandon. Her eyes, usually narrowed in astute analysis, were wide and sparkling. She had invited me tonight, securing 2 of the most coveted VIP tickets for the Eras tour as a thank you. A thank you for what was, without a doubt, the single greatest achievement of my professional life. My name is Danielle Russo, and until about 30 seconds ago, I was the 34-year-old director of public relations for Suncaster Bioworks. Or rather, I was the director. I had built their communications department from the ground up over a decade. When I started, fresh from graduate school, with a degree in communications and a hunger to prove myself, Suncaster was a small, brilliant research company with zero media presence. They had the science, but no one to tell their story. I became that storyteller. For 10 years, I had poured my life into that company. I'd worked 18-hour days, survived on caffeine and ambition, and sacrificed countless weekends. I had built the press protocols, the client relationship systems, and the crisis management procedures that had saved the company millions during a contamination scare 2 years prior. My flawless product launch for our new flagship drug, Solara, just 3 months ago had brought in an unprecedented $42 million in pre-orders and landed us on the cover of 3 major industry magazines. I wasn't just an employee, I was an architect of the company's public identity. And I had just been fired. My phone, clutched in my hand to capture a video of the spectacle, buzzed with an incoming message. I glanced down, expecting a text from my sister asking for a concert update. The name on the screen made my stomach clench: Gregory Walsh. Gregory was our director of operations, a man who wore his mediocrity like an ill-fitting suit. He had been gunning for me ever since I'd joined the executive team, a position I'd earned through merit, which allowed me to report directly to our CEO, Robert Chin. Gregory, on the other hand, had to climb the traditional ladder, and he resented me for leapfrogging him in the informal hierarchy. The tension had peaked 6 months ago when he presented a ridiculous proposal. He wanted the company to sponsor his exclusive country club's annual golf tournament to the tune of $75,000. He dressed it up as a networking opportunity, but I saw it for what it was: him using company funds to boost his personal social standing. I had presented my analysis to him and the CEO, pointing out that the demographic of his golf buddies didn't align with our target market for highly specialized pharmaceuticals. It was a waste of a significant portion of my marketing budget. My integrity apparently made me difficult to work with. Robert had sided with me, and Gregory's simmering resentment had boiled over into quiet, petty acts of sabotage ever since. I tapped the screen, my thumb hovering over the notification. The music swelled, the crowd screamed, and I read the words that detonated my professional life. You're terminated, effective immediately. Frankly, you're too emotional for leadership. I'm giving your position to my golf buddy, Trevor. The words blurred. The sound of the stadium faded into a dull roar in my ears. I read the text again, and again. Each word was a tiny, sharp icicle piercing through the warmth and elation of the concert. Too emotional? The accusation was so absurd, so transparently a projection of his own insecurities, that for a moment I felt a surge of hysterical laughter bubble in my chest. He had fired me. The man whose biggest professional crisis involved a bad batch of coffee in the break room had fired me. The the woman who had navigated the company through a potential multi-million-dollar PR disaster without breaking a sweat. And he'd done it via text, to hire his golf buddy. The irony was suffocating. Here I was, sitting next to a board member who had brought me here to celebrate a $42 million success, and my career had just been professionally assassinated by a text message. Patricia leaned over, shouting over the music. "Isn't this incredible? I can't believe you got us these seats." Wait. She thought I got the seats? Of course. Gregory had probably told her that too. Another small, pathetic attempt to take credit for something he hadn't done. I forced a smile, my mind racing a million miles a minute, calculating the fallout, the damage, the chaos this would unleash. My clients, the campaigns, my team, my life. "Actually, Patricia," I said, my voice surprisingly steady as I angled the glowing screen of my phone toward her. "I have something interesting to show you." I watched her expression shift in the pulsing, colorful lights. First, confusion, as she squinted to read the small text. Then, her smile faltered, replaced by a look of utter shock. Her eyes, which had been sparkling with the joy of the concert, hardened into chips of ice. The muscles in her jaw tightened. She took the phone from my hand, reading the message one more time, her face going from shock to absolute fury in the span of 5 seconds. "He fired you? Tonight? During this?" She gestured vaguely at the spectacular stage production around us, her voice a low, dangerous growl that cut through the noise. "Apparently so," I replied, the hollowness in my own voice surprising me. I could practically see the gears turning in her head, the mind of a seasoned executive processing the implications. This wasn't just a personnel issue. This was a direct threat to the company's stability. I kept my voice steady, though inside I was calculating the catastrophic damage this would cause. 3 major clients had specifically requested to work only with me. 2 product launches were scheduled for next month, under my direct supervision. And Gregory wanted to hand it all over to Trevor Morrison, a guy whose biggest professional achievement was organizing a charity golf tournament that raised $12,000. The music swelled around us, a symphony of heartbreak and revenge, but Patricia was no longer paying attention to the show. She was scrolling through my phone, her face growing darker with each word she read of the email chain I had saved regarding the golf tournament. Looking back, I should have seen this coming, I murmured, more to myself than to her. Gregory Walsh had always resented that I reported directly to the CEO, while he had to work his way up through traditional channels. Patricia didn't respond immediately. She was still staring at my phone, her thumbs swiping furiously. She was a powerhouse, a woman who had shattered glass ceilings in the cutthroat world of biotech. She understood power, and she understood betrayal. The rest of the concert was a blur. I stood, I sat, I clapped when everyone else clapped, but my mind was a storm of what-ifs and what-nows. The weekend stretched before me like a desolate wasteland. On Friday night, Gregory had not only fired me, but had also sent out a company-wide email announcing the change. He thanked me for my service, a condescending pat on the head that made my blood boil, and welcomed Trevor Morrison as the new head of PR. The calls started on Saturday. First, it was Janet Hernandez, the CEO of Hernandez Pharmaceuticals, our largest single account. "Danielle, I need to know what's happening," she'd said, her voice tight with concern. "My assistant says someone named Trevor Morrison called, claiming to be taking over our account." I chose my words carefully, knowing that one wrong statement could trigger a contractual review. "There have been some internal changes at Suncaster, Janet. I'm not currently in a position to discuss specifics, but I wanted you to hear from me directly that your account's continuity is my primary concern." "Danielle, you know I trust you completely," she said, and the words were both a comfort and a knife twist. "But my contract is with you personally. If you're not managing our campaign, we need to reassess our partnership immediately." By 8 a.m. on Monday, I had received similar calls from the heads of Morrison Medical and Westbrook Research. Each conversation followed the same pattern: initial confusion, growing concern, and finally, thinly veiled threats to terminate their contracts if I wasn't involved. I documented every single conversation, knowing that Patricia would need this information for the emergency board meeting she had scheduled for Monday morning. Trevor Morrison, meanwhile, seemed blissfully unaware of the crisis he was inheriting. According to my former assistant, Kelly, who texted me updates throughout the weekend, Trevor had spent Saturday afternoon measuring my office for new furniture and asking IT to change all the department passwords. He had also scheduled a meet and greet with the junior staff for Monday morning, apparently planning to introduce himself as their new leader. Gregory's confidence was almost impressive in its stupidity. I spent Sunday afternoon preparing a comprehensive handover document. It wasn't out of obligation, but as protection for myself and for the junior staff who didn't deserve to suffer for Gregory's vendetta. The document outlined every active campaign, client preference, ongoing crisis management protocol, and scheduled deliverable for the next 6 months. It was 47 pages of detailed, institutional knowledge that Trevor, with his single business degree and experience managing social media for a local pizza chain, would never be able to replicate. But the document also served another purpose. It demonstrated, in black and white, exactly how much Gregory didn't understand about my role. Every page highlighted relationships, expertise, and ongoing commitments that couldn't simply be transferred to an inexperienced replacement. Monday morning arrived with a text from Patricia, emergency board meeting at 9 a.m. Come prepared to present your side. This is far from over. I dressed carefully in my best navy suit, the one I wore for high-stakes client presentations. If I was going to fight for my career, I wanted to look like the consummate professional Gregory claimed I wasn't. I arrived at Suncaster's headquarters 30 minutes early, using my still-active building access to retrieve files from my office before Trevor arrived. The sight of my workspace was jarring. My industry awards had been packed into boxes. My client photos were removed from the walls, and my personalized coffee mug was replaced with a generic Suncaster tumbler. Trevor had already started making the space his own, which felt like a violation of something sacred. At 8:45 a.m., I positioned myself in the conference room adjacent to the boardroom, reviewing my notes one final time. Whatever happened in the next hour would determine whether Gregory's impulsive power grab succeeded, or whether justice would finally catch up with his reckless ambition. The emergency board meeting began with Patricia Henderson placing my termination text message on the conference table like evidence in a murder trial. The 7 board members read it in silence, their expressions ranging from confusion to outrage as the implications became clear. Gregory fired our director of public relations via text message, Patricia announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent 20 years building corporate empires. During a concert, without board consultation. And he plans to replace her with someone whose qualifications include managing a restaurant's social media account. Gregory Walsh sat at the far end of the table, his usual confidence visibly shaken. He had clearly expected this to be a routine personnel announcement, not a tribunal examining his decision-making competence. Beside him, CEO Robertson looked like he was developing a migraine in real time. Based on departmental efficiency, Gregory began, but Patricia cut him off immediately. Efficiency? Let me share some efficiency metrics with you. She opened a folder containing the documents I had prepared. Danielle Russo generated $234 million in positive media coverage value last year. Her client retention rate was 96%. She prevented 3 potential crises from becoming public scandals, saving us an estimated $50 million in damage control costs. Board member Thomas Wright leaned forward. What are Trevor Morrison's qualifications? Gregory's face flushed. Trevor brings fresh perspective and strategic thinking to answer the question, Wright interrupted. What is his experience in pharmaceutical communications? He has a business degree and strong communication skills. That's not what I asked. The room fell silent as Gregory struggled to articulate Trevor's non-existent qualifications. Finally, he admitted, Trevor doesn't have direct pharmaceutical experience, but he's eager to learn and brings valuable outside perspective. Patricia smiled coldly. Outside perspective? Is that what you call it when 3 of our biggest clients are threatening to terminate their contracts because they specifically contracted to work with Danielle personally? This was news to Gregory, and his face went pale. What clients? Hernandez Pharmaceuticals, Morrison Medical, and Westbrook Research, I said, speaking for the first time. Combined annual contract value of $37 million, with renewal options worth an additional $42 million over the next 3 years. Robertson finally found his voice. Gregory, please tell me you reviewed the contractual obligations before making this decision. The silence that followed was deafening. Gregory clearly had no idea that my client relationships were legally protected through specific performance clauses. He had assumed that firing me would automatically transfer all client relationships to Trevor, like changing the name on a business card. Board member Sarah Kim pulled out her phone. I'm getting calls from industry contacts asking if Suncasto is facing financial difficulties. Apparently, word is spreading that we've made sudden leadership changes in critical departments. The pharmaceutical industry is incredibly relationship-driven, I explained. Trust takes years to build and can be destroyed overnight. My clients don't just work with Suncaster. They work with me specifically because they trust my judgment, my expertise, and my track record of protecting their interests. Patricia nodded. Which brings us to the real question. Gregory, did you fire Danielle because of performance issues, or because she refused to approve your golf tournament sponsorship proposal? Gregory's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The tournament proposal had been thoroughly documented in board minutes, including my professional recommendation against using company funds for Gregory's personal networking events. I think, Robertson said slowly, we need to discuss damage control. Immediately. The question isn't whether Gregory made a mistake, it's whether we can fix it before our stock price reflects these client defections. Robertson stood at the head of the conference table, his face grave as he addressed the board. Ladies and gentlemen, we're facing a crisis entirely of our own making. Gregory's decision has put our most valuable client relationships at risk and potentially violated contractual obligations worth tens of millions of dollars. Gregory made one last, desperate attempt to defend his actions. I maintain that this was a necessary restructuring decision. Danielle was resistant to new ideas and difficult to work with when implementing strategic changes. Stop. Patricia's voice cut through the room like a blade. Let's address this resistance to new ideas. Danielle, please tell the board about Gregory's most recent strategic suggestion. I opened my portfolio and pulled out the proposal Gregory had submitted 3 weeks earlier. Gregory requested approval for Suncaster to sponsor his country club's annual golf tournament at a cost of $75,000. His justification was that it would provide networking opportunities with potential clients. And your professional assessment? Robert asked. I recommended against it for several reasons. First, the demographic attending Gregory's country club doesn't align with our target market. We're a pharmaceutical research company, not a luxury consumer brand. Second, $75,000 represents approximately 15% of my entire annual marketing budget, which would require cutting other proven initiatives. Third, the optics of spending that much on a golf tournament while we're asking employees to accept smaller raises due to budget constraints seemed problematic. Thomas Wright nodded approvingly. That sounds like exactly the kind of strategic thinking we pay her to provide. Gregory's face reddened. She consistently undermines management decisions and questions authority. She questions spending company money on your personal hobby, Patricia interrupted. That's called doing her job. Sarah Kim looked up from her phone with alarming news. I'm getting reports that Hernandez Pharmaceuticals just issued a statement saying they're reviewing their partnership options with Suncasto. Their stock price has already dropped 3% on speculation about their pipeline disruptions. The room erupted in urgent whispers as board members processed the immediate financial implications. Hernandez Pharmaceuticals represented Suncasto's largest single account, and any disruption to their partnership would devastate quarterly earnings. Robertson slumped in his chair. How long do we have before this becomes a public relations nightmare? It already is, I said quietly. Industry publications monitor partnership announcements closely. By tomorrow morning, every pharmaceutical communications firm in the Southeast will know that Suncasto made sudden leadership changes in their PR department. Our competitors will use this instability to approach our clients with retention offers. The gravity of the situation finally seemed to penetrate Gregory's delusions of competence. Maybe we can offer Trevor some additional training. Training? Wright laughed bitterly. Gregory, Danielle has 10 years of specialized expertise and established relationships that took decades to build. You can't create that with a weekend seminar. Patricia leaned forward. Here's what's going to happen. Gregory, you're going to personally call Trevor Morrison and explain that there's been a change in plans. Then you're going to draft a company-wide retraction of your premature announcement. But I already promised him the position. Then you'll explain that you made a promise you didn't have the authority to keep, Robert said firmly. This board has ultimate authority over department head appointments, and we're exercising that authority now. The room fell silent as the reality of Gregory's situation became clear. He had overplayed his hand spectacularly, turning what should have been a routine power struggle into a company-threatening crisis. Danielle, Patricia said, turning to me with a slight smile. I believe we have some offer negotiations to discuss. Tuesday morning, I walked back into Suncaster Bioworks with a spring in my step and a significantly improved employment contract in my briefcase. The emergency board meeting had concluded with Gregory's immediate suspension pending review, Trevor Morrison's hasty dismissal before he could cause further damage, and my reinstatement with a 20% salary increase plus equity compensation. But my real victory wasn't financial, it was professional vindication. The first person I encountered was Kelly, my former assistant, who was practically bouncing with excitement.
Danielle,
Everyone's been asking when you'd be back. Trevor lasted exactly 36 hours before he accidentally deleted the master client contact database. I couldn't help but smile. Accidentally. He was trying to streamline the system and somehow managed to corrupt 3 years' worth of meticulously organized contact information. IT spent all of yesterday recreating it from backup files. As I walked through the department I had built from nothing, junior staff members approached with expressions of relief and barely contained joy. The past 4 days had shown them exactly what my institutional knowledge and leadership were worth. Without my guidance, they had struggled with basic client communications and nearly missed 2 critical campaign deadlines. My office had been hastily restored to its original configuration, though I noticed Gregory's personal items were conspicuously absent from the adjacent director's suite. Patricia had mentioned during our contract negotiations that Gregory's future with the company was under evaluation, which was corporate speak for updating his resume. I spent the morning fielding calls from clients who were relieved to hear directly from me that the personnel transition had been resolved. Janet Hernandez was particularly blunt. Danielle, that Trevor person called me 3 times yesterday asking basic questions about our product pipeline. It was like explaining quantum physics to a golden retriever. By noon, word had spread throughout the pharmaceutical industry that Suncasto had restructured its recent organizational changes. The stock price recovered, client confidence stabilized, and normal operations resumed. The true extent of Gregory's downfall became clear over the following weeks. The board's investigation revealed a pattern of questionable decisions and ethical lapses that extended far beyond my termination. His expense reports showed numerous business dinners at his country club with people who had no apparent connection to Suncasto. He had also been pressuring vendors to sponsor his personal golf events in exchange for favorable contract considerations. Most damaging was the discovery that Gregory had promised Trevor Morrison my position 3 months before firing me, complete with a written agreement outlining salary and benefits. This proved premeditation and demonstrated that my termination was retaliatory rather than performance-based. Patricia called me into her office on a Friday afternoon with an update. Gregory submitted his resignation yesterday. He's accepted a position with a small consulting firm in Tampa, Florida, a significant step down from a director level at a major pharmaceutical company. I felt a complex mix of satisfaction and professional disappointment. Gregory's vindictive behavior had created unnecessary chaos, but I took no pleasure in anyone's career destruction. Trevor Morrison has also found new employment, Patricia continued, with barely concealed amusement. He's managing social media for a chain of pizza restaurants. Apparently, he decided pharmaceutical communications was too complicated for his skill set. The irony was perfect. Trevor had returned to exactly the type of role he was actually qualified for, while Gregory discovered that burning bridges in a specialized industry severely limited future opportunities. My real revenge wasn't orchestrating their downfall, it was simply excelling at my job while they demonstrated their incompetence. The contrast spoke for itself. That afternoon, I received a handwritten note from Robertson. Danielle, your professionalism during this crisis reminded everyone why strong leadership matters. Thank you for handling an impossible situation with grace. Sometimes the best revenge is just being excellent while your enemies destroy themselves through their own poor choices. As I looked toward the future, I realized that surviving Gregory's betrayal had actually strengthened my position within the company and industry. The board's confidence in my abilities was now unshakable. My client relationships had been tested and proven unbreakable, and my reputation for handling crises with integrity was stronger than ever. Sometimes, the sweetest revenge is simply watching your enemy's own actions prove exactly why they never deserved the power they tried to steal from you.